We've now begun and are about to conclude, get everybody on board in relation to the Africa Free Continental Trade Area, which will remove all barricades to trade within Africa, amongst African countries, and increase the volume of trade amongst the African countries. And that is a population of about 1.4 billion. And that's a very young population whose dynamism and youthful.
Breaking news from the heart of Africa. A silent revolution is turning into a roar, and it's echoing from the deserts of the Sahel to the parliaments of southern Africa. And leading the charge? Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. This young revolutionary, once seen as just a military leader, is now emerging as one of Africa's strongest voices for economic freedom. And today, we're not just talking about speeches, we're talking action. In a powerful show of unity, Botswana's political leader Dumaboko has called for the full removal of all trade barriers between African nations, urging a complete, fast-tracked implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, also known as AfCFTA. Captain Traoré supports this call and is already building alliances to make it a reality, with military, political, and now economic moves shaking the old systems. Traoré is turning colonial borders into fading lines on a map. What does a borderless Africa mean? Free movement, no tariffs, local industries thriving, youth employment rising, Africa finally trading with Africa. Is this the rise of a new era? One where the continent breaks free from the shackles of foreign control and builds its future, united and unstoppable. Stay with us, because what you're about to hear next may be the most important shift in African politics and economy since independence. What if I told you the next great economic revolution isn't coming from Europe or China, but from the heart of Africa? Imagine an Africa where trucks don't stop at borders, where goods and ideas flow freely across nations, where African nations no longer wait for approval from the West to grow. Imagine an Africa where we trade not in dependency, but in unity. At the center of this new vision stands a young leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the revolutionary head of state of Burkina Faso. While some African leaders speak about change, Traoré is living it, taking bold steps, challenging the status quo. And just recently, Botswana's Dumaboko made a historic call: the full and complete implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA, a dream that promises to erase economic borders and unleash Africa's true potential. This is not just a political movement. This is an economic uprising. Today, on AfCFTA News, we explore how Traoré and fellow Pan-African visionaries are reshaping the continent, one border at a time. Stay with us. Africa is the richest continent on Earth, yet it remains the poorest. We trade more with Europe, Asia, and America than we do with our neighbors. An orange from South Africa is more likely to reach France than Ghana. A textile from Ethiopia is more likely to end up in China than in Nigeria. Why? Because for decades, we have exported raw resources while importing finished goods. But Traoré didn't come to power for glory. He came to dismantle systems of exploitation. The continent's borders, drawn by colonial powers, have turned brothers into competitors and neighbors into strangers. Colonial powers established roads, railways, and ports that led only to the coast, not to connect African countries, but to export raw materials. According to the African Union, intra-African trade makes up less than 17% of total African exports. Even today, shipping goods from Lagos to Nairobi can take longer than shipping from Lagos to London. Tariffs, red tape, and outdated customs systems make it nearly impossible for African businesses to scale across the continent. They are economic walls that prevent Africa from growing together. Compare that to the 60% intra-trade in Europe or 40% in Asia. These artificial borders are not just physical. But what if those borders didn't exist? If successful, AfCFTA could increase intra-African trade by over 50% in just a few years. He was a young soldier when he led a popular uprising in Burkina Faso in 2022, becoming the world's youngest president. It could add $450 billion to Africa's GDP by 2035, according to the World Bank. Since taking office, Traoré has expelled French troops, restructured foreign mining contracts, and redirected national resources toward the people. He's publicly embraced Pan-Africanism and invoked the legacy of Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's legendary anti-colonial leader. He urged African leaders to stop dragging their feet and start enforcing AfCFTA with full force. The three nations are exploring shared currencies, regional trade routes, and investment in joint infrastructure. But perhaps his most important move? Pushing for economic liberation. Why must a youth entrepreneur in Togo pay multiple taxes to sell in Benin? Africa's economy was built to serve Europe. This legacy continues. Meanwhile, foreign corporations dominate African trade. They import cheap goods, export raw materials, and leave local economies weak and dependent. Traoré and other leaders believe this must end. The African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA, was launched in 2018 and is now the world's largest free trade area by number of countries. Its goal is simple: to eliminate tariffs and create a single market across 54 countries. It would allow African companies to expand regionally, reduce prices for consumers, and increase job creation. But the real power of AfCFTA lies in its political message. Africa can rise without asking permission. Captain Traoré has publicly voiced his support for AfCFTA and has called for practical steps, not just signatures on paper. It's a declaration of independence. From neo-colonial trade, from aid dependency, from poverty. In a bold speech, Botswana opposition leader Dumaboko declared that Africa must remove all trade barriers. Boko asked, "Why should a truck from Lusaka need 10 documents to cross into Malawi?" His solution: erase the borders that divide us economically, starting with harmonizing tax systems, customs policies, and logistics infrastructure. His message echoed Traoré's revolution, Africa for Africans. Traoré, along with Mali's Assimi Goïta and Niger's Abdourahmane Tiani, has formed the Sahel Alliance, a regional bloc focused on sovereignty, security, and shared prosperity. The alliance is not just military, it is economic. By prioritizing local trade and breaking dependency on former colonial powers, the Sahel Alliance is becoming a model of economic pan-Africanism. AfCFTA, they argue, must be backed by regional cooperation, not just AU meetings. But the road to a borderless Africa is not easy. Corruption at customs, political instability, weak transport networks, and vested foreign interests all stand in the way. Some governments have signed AfCFTA, but haven't implemented a single reform. Some elite groups profit from the existing system and resist change. And global powers are watching closely, worried about losing influence in a united Africa. Yet, the youth are rising. Pan-African entrepreneurs, digital platforms, and agribusinesses are pushing past the obstacles, slowly building the future Traoré envisions. Imagine a continent where African airlines dominate African skies, where mobile money works in every country, where railroads connect Dakar to Dar es Salaam. A continent where African goods are sold in African stores and African innovations fuel African cities. That is the vision Ibrahim Traoré fights for. AfCFTA is not just a policy. And this generation, led by Traoré, inspired by Sankara, and supported by millions of Africans across the continent, has the power to make it real. This is not just economics. It's revolution. And it begins now.